everyone. My name is Joe Smoke, and I'm the director of the grant program. And we're going to present a highlighted version of the guidelines. One of the things I'm going to ask you to do is read everything thoroughly on your own. The purpose of today's meeting is not to read the guidelines verbatim, but to draw your attention to important parts and to give you some strategic information about how to apply. That's the best use of our time. And again, anytime you have a question, my suggestion is you put it in the chat to Muna and let her read it. We're not going to take the questions in the order that they come in, but more in the order of the information. So if you ask a question and we defer it for 20 minutes until a later part of the guidelines, then you'll understand why. It'll help us to not repeat ourselves. So the COLA-IMAP program is a prestigious City of LA grant program that's also connected to a secondary program called Cultural Trailblazers. The goals of both programs are to qualify a spectrum of mid-career literary, performing, and visual design artists who will be selected to create new solo work between fall of 25 and spring of 26. COLA is an opportunity for you to be recognized for the work you've already done. You will create new work in about a 6 to 8 month period. So you want to think about a feasible project that's coming during that window, fall 25 to spring 26. And we want you to think of something that you can show us in your studio as a studio visit, not something completely conceptual that won't be done until the last minute. That'll make everyone nervous. So the COLA grants cannot support things that are interactive, things that are collaborative, unless you're applying as a duo because you've worked together as a duo for many years and you're presenting us with a resume of a duo, or anything that you want to cite in a place of your own choice. COLA ends with 2 showcases. The literary and performing artists perform at grand performances at California and downtown LA in either 1 or 2 evenings of staged performances. So if you apply in literary and performing arts, you should be aiming for a showcase, a group showcase in that venue. And if you are a visual design artist, you will be placed inside the Los Angeles Municipal Art Gallery in a space of the choice of the curator. So if your project today, if your overall work is about group activity, we have other grant programs for you. And I would ask you to look at our NEAR program, which stands for Neighborhood Engagement Artist Residency, where we pay artists $12,000 to do a set of workshops with a group of 20 people of their choice, and to come out with a project in the end. That's the best place for social practice artists and for anyone who's a teaching artist. We have other grant programs. COLA is really about solo practitioners doing work that is under their specific authorship. Next paragraph here talks about unrestrained installations and complicated performances. It's not the priority of this program for 2 reasons. One, we have to see what you're going to present in order to decide how much of it we have room for. It is a group show. If you produce 20 massive sculptures, we choose 2. If you write an entire novel, we may ask you to read half of a chapter. So you have to be aware of the fact that we want you to be prolific and we want you to follow the trajectory of your career, but we are A, not going to show everything you produce, and B, we may avoid complicated things because they just don't fit within the staged performance of a group or a very regular gallery exhibition. You also want to think about feasible things because $10,000 goes fast, and we want you to not overspend. We'd like you to pay for your own time, which is rare for artists to do, but to think about compensating yourself rather than spending all of the money on materials. So again, there are some other limitations here. The gallery can't handle anything that's 12 feet or taller. It won't fit through the doors or elevators. for the projecting of films and stuff, you might think about a 30-minute excerpt or shorter thing. Same with sound installations. It's very rare for someone to be in the gallery and sit still for more than 30 minutes. So think about producing the piece of the length that you want, but understand that we will curate out of that. The last paragraph of the front page of my introduction just reminds you that a letter of recommendation from an academic, a curator, or a colleague who has insightful things to say your work is something that you should pursue now. Don't wait till the last minute to get a letter. And I would also tell you strategically not to tell the person what to say about yourself. Is too common in grant writing that the artist writes the proposal and then they take excerpts from their proposal and they tell the recommender to say these things about me. That is not going to be value added. The panelists will be unhappy to read the same thing again. It's redundant. It won't add value to your proposal, and it will not sound like the authentic voice of the recommender. So do ask more than one person, is my recommendation, to write a letter of recommendation to you based on what you've already done in your career, and don't curate it too much. And then decide yourself if the letter is warm, super warm, or hot, and then decide to put it onto the proposal. Better to get more letters and to take out the lukewarm ones and only submit the things that are hot, hot, hot. Because one of the other points of strategic advice I'll give you is that the letter of recommendation is the last thing in the proposal that the panelists read before they fill out their score sheet. So if it is lukewarm or redundant, then you end on a down note. If it's hot, 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 you end on a high note, and they hear another person's authentic voice saying why you are important in your field. And that's the best case scenario because that elevates you and in scoring. All right, I'm going to move down the page, Muna, and then we'll take some questions. The next part and framework I preface by saying that this is truly an easy grant. I know that some of you may snicker because artists are never taught grant writing in school, nor are we familiar in our field with business writing. But truly, this is a very simple grant application. You should not apply once and then go away. This is the kind of application where you want to fill out all the parts, you want to keep the parts, and you want to keep every year because the panelists change every year, your career changes every year, and you don't know when the match is going to happen. So it's very, very, very rare for someone to apply once and to get the grant. So just think about that as you apply, that this is, you're customizing everything for this opportunity, and then we're going to ask you to iterate it in future years. This grant is always available due the last Friday of every October. So the artist statement is a half a page, and it's really past influences and your accomplishments. So that is something that you draft in whatever voice you choose, third person, first person. If you're an artist who doesn't like to talk, have your friend interview you and put it on the page as an interview. It can be whimsical and light if you prefer not to be ultra serious, but that should relate to your work. So just make sure that the tone of voice of your artist statement relates to how you present yourself as an artist. And this next part is the project narrative. By the way, the artist statement should be 1.5 pages. This is a grant that's based on primarily on your past accomplishments. So you want to spend the most amount of time making sure that that is what you are pronouncing in the grant. And this next part where you say what you will do with the $10,000 during the period, it's only half a page for a reason, because it's not the focus of this grant. It's not an open ideas competition. It's not a chance for you to dream the impossible dream. We want you to just follow the trajectory of your career and tell us what's next, and to present it as a logical thing that you can do, in 6 months with $6,000 is what I would say, or it says here 8 months and $8,000. So you want to make sure that you don't overdo it, overpromise on the project narrative, And you also don't want to make it vague. I can tell you as one piece of strategic advice, some artists cop out and they just say, I want to make my paintings bigger, or I've never done an installation and I want to do an installation. There has to be a reason for that. The panelists don't appreciate just the fact that, you know, more money means bigger. So if there's a purpose to making the paintings bigger, great. If there's a purpose to taking your short form poetry into the epic long form, then that's what you do. If not, then just do what's logical, lead next for your career, and don't think about, you know, that it has to be big to be impressive, or that it has to be, you know, unbounded to make the panelists impressed. They're more impressed with your past than they are with what you intend to do. The resume. The best thing to do at this point is to figure out how to showcase the last 15 years on your resume. There could be years off if you chose to take time off and have a family, or you're an architect and you stopped painting for a couple of years and then you went back to painting. It doesn't have to be consecutive, but you want to make sure that you're giving us 15 years of work. If our staff can't open your resume and find the 15 years to qualify you, then automatically you go into the maybe pile. So please don't just submit your resume and assume that we're going to figure it out. And also, if you have a 40-year career, think about the panelists reading hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of proposals. It may not be the best strategy to give them your long resume, but you only have to show 15 years of quality work to be eligible as a visual design artist, as a literary artist, or as a performer. If you are a dancer, we allow you to truncate that to 8, since the lifespan of a career in dance is shorter. So whatever that is, do what's required and a little bit more, and you don't have to show more unless it's absolutely amazing what you did 21 years ago. Artistic samples, we'll go over this later, but with very few exceptions, giving us recent items only from the last 2 or 3 years. The purpose of the artistic samples is not the same purpose as the resume. The resume shows us that you've been working consecutively for 15 years or for 8 years as a dancer. The samples show us where you are today and where you will jump off from to your next project. So it's very, very rare for you to go back further than the last 2 or 3 years in the samples. And the best work should always go first. So do not make the mistake of putting your samples in chronological order or any other kind of order that you think is important. What's really important is to show us those iconic things you've done in the last 2 or 3 years first, and then to show us other things that are the context for your great work. And lastly, supplemental forms should add value. They should be new information and a new voice. The entire proposal up until this point is in the first person. It's stuff you selected to say about yourself or you selected to include. So please make sure that anything you put in the supplemental materials is value added. So if it's a press release that you wrote about yourself, that's not a good choice. If it's a press release that your gallery wrote about you, that's a good choice. If it's something from a monographic publication, you might put in the whole essay, but highlight the parts that are most insightful about you so that the panelists don't have to search to find the value. If it's a review of a group show where they say 3 interesting things about you in the middle, then copy the entire review, but highlight the portion that's about you, because again, you want the panelists to get the value added right away and to not read about other artists and other things. I'll stop at that point, Muna, because I think it's important for you to let me know if there's any questions already in the chat.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. Yes, we do have 2 questions in the chat. The first one is from Heather. The question is about the artist statement. And Heather asked if the artist statement need to start with a career narrative and then go into the statement about the actual artwork. So
think
career narrative and then
I think that's usually the best methodology, is to tell us, a little bit about your education, a little bit about your influences, a little about the genesis of your career, and then get to talking about what you've been doing in the last couple of years. Generally speaking, that's how most artists apply.
Great. And then the second question from Melody is about letters of recommendation. Can the same letter be used for several grant programs? She's worried of asking the recommender too many times. So, yeah.
It's fine to ask one person for a letter and then just have them change the first line. I'm recommending blank blank artists for a near grant from DCA. This letter of recommendation is for blank blank artists for the COLA-IMAP program. I think it's always good to have the opening line address the purpose, and after that, everything else can be the same. So it may very well be that you just, as a courtesy to the person, do that. Our programs are very different. So if you're applying to two programs, the same letter of recommendation may not work, because COLA is really about solo work as a studio practitioner, whereas NEAR is about your ability to do community engagement. So I'm going to say, if that doesn't answer your question and you're still concerned, then call us outside of this meeting. But generally speaking, people do have different kinds of letters of recommendation for different grant opportunities. A kind of standardized letter that you use for everything may not read very well in this context.
Great. I think that's it for now, as we have more questions, but we're going to answer them later on.
Sure. So let's continue down. So let's give the next level of strategic advice. Muna, if you can bring down the presentation a little bit. So the next thing for the artist to know is that the fellowship payments are not dispersed to you immediately. So Muna does not show up at your front door with a big $10,000 check. I know that would make you happy and her happy, but we are working our wizardry behind the scenes to make this program happen at all. So what it means is the city charter prohibits us from giving money to someone before they've performed a service. So we visit you in your studio and talk about your work, and we pay you allotment of money. Then we come back and you show us your biography, and you show us the article, the kind of essay you'd like to accompany your work in the COLA catalog, and we have a portrait photographer there to make a portrait of you, and that's the second benchmark, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is a working contract, and you have to understand that if you are perplexed and exhausted by just the grant application, you need to understand that this is a contract for services and more paperwork will follow, and that the money is not doesn't come to you front up, right? So I think it's important, again, because it's a note of caution for artists to be feasible. We want you to be aspirational, but at the same time practical about what you're applying to do. And lastly, you have to complete the work and show it in the gallery exhibition. It's a group show and every is tied to each other. So that's another reason why we want you to be very practical, because if you can't deliver your work on the last night at the last minute, then you have to give us all the money back, because that's what the city charter says. If you don't fulfill the entire contract, then you owe us all the money back. So do, again, take that as a forewarning that this is a contract for services, and it is incremental, and it is cumulative, and that you really want to be practical about how you propose your project. The Trailblazers is a category that's associated with COLA-IMAP, and I'm taking the time to explain that because I've already said to you that it's very difficult to just apply once and get this grant. It's more likely that the panelists have 35 artists that they really, really like, but we're telling them that they only have money for 8. So they've got to make hard choices. And one of the choices they make is that they choose the top 8, and then they give a trailblazer status to people that they really think did an excellent job applying and are on the verge of busting through whatever glass ceilings they imagine you have. And so please know that Trailblazer is given $400 and we promote you on our website and you do a miniature project and you get promoted by the Department of Cultural Affairs. And it is another honor that we've built into this process so that we can quote unquote double the goodness. We can only afford so many COLA fellowships because the catalog can only be 80 pages and the shows can only be, 5 to 6 artists at grand performances and no more than 10 at the gallery. So inevitably the panelists love more than but they have money to spend. And so just know that that's why you may get a Trailblazer award along the way. It's really important. And you can only get a Trailblazer once, same as COLA. So once you get it, it just means thumbs up, keep going. You're already a treasure in the city of LA, and we appreciate what you do. Next, eligibility, if we can go down, Muna. So I want to start talking about eligibility. So you should discuss yourself as a professional master of self-involved ideas. You are not, in this instance, the curator of other people's work. You are not presenting other people's work. You are not an interpreter of other people's ideas. So if you have a one-person show, the assumption is that it's written and performed by you. It is not Shakespeare. You're not performing Shakespeare. You're not taking on a character from Shakespeare. That is not the purpose of this grant. This grant is really for artists who do everything from the inception of the ideas to the writing to the performing. And also, this is not a category for people who've been in a band for 4 years but never performed solo, or been in a dance ensemble for years and never performed solo, or any visual artists who've made their career in social practice. You can submit one proposal only. So if you are one of the many thousands of artists that we meet every day that say they are interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, multi-talented, multi-dimensional, we agree. The dilemma here is that you choose the category you apply in because you choose the first panel to review your work. So if you are an architect and a painter, for you, it's the same panel, but you still can only craft a proposal in one way. So you have to choose painting, you have to choose visual design, and you have to tell us right away you're applying as a painter. If you're a musician and a painter, you have a very big decision on your hands because you've got to choose music or painting, and they are different first-time panels. So the music proposals would go to the performing arts experts first, and the painting proposal will go to a design visual panel first. So please, only one proposal. You're not really allowed to say in here, I might do poetry and I might do painting. The panel doesn't want a mystery. They want to buy a service. And it's up to you to decide among all your transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary, multidimensional self, like what is the project you want to apply for. So if anyone's confused by this, I just say think backwards. What are you going to do with the $8,000 or $6,000? What are you going to make? Is it going to be in the gallery or on the stage? And that's how you craft the rest of your proposal. And leave everything else out. If you're a painter, we don't need to know about your architecture. If you're a poet, we don't need to know about your music. If you're a musician, we don't need to know about your graphic design career. One thing is all we can handle in this category because we're aiming for that kismet between you and the panelists. We're not aiming for an open dialogue of what might happen if we give you a grant. Your resume should definitely show us that you've lived in the city of LA or that you have presented for 3 or more years in the city of LA. The grant is open to people who live throughout Los Angeles County because we know that there's no invisible border around the city of Los Angeles. But somehow you need to create a nexus in your resume to the city of Los Angeles because that's where the tax dollars are coming from for this program. And that's an important thing for us to see. So please make sure you don't miss that opportunity. There are 88 cities in Los Angeles County: Malibu, Long Beach, West Hollywood, Hawthorne. These are all different cities with a different government. We are the city of LA. So if you're in the city of LA, the best way to know it is to go to this website called neighborhoodinformation.gov. It's run by the city of LA, and you type in your address. And if I typed in my address, it would tell me I'm in Council District 13. My council member is Hugo Sotomayor Martinez. My trash is picked up on Thursdays. My street is swept on Fridays, and it'll tell me all about my site. And if it says not found, then I don't live in the city of Los Angeles, and I need to do further research and say, oh, I'm in the city of San Fernando, or I'm in the city of Santa Monica. So fine to apply from another city, but the best case scenario is that you live in the city of LA, you know your council district, and that you have a relationship, exhibition relationship that's equivalent. Panelists don't judge this as a criteria, but we do in our auditing, because we don't want people from New York and Singapore to apply for these grants. We reserve them for people that have a working relationship with the city of Los Angeles. Again, on the next page, you see it again: minimum 15 years, 8 if you're a choreographer, progressive exhibitions, publications, and performances. Doesn't have to be cumulative, but it should make some sort of logic that you are in fact an artist who's dedicated to your craft. So I see lots of pop-up windows, Muna. I'll stop there and ask if there's important questions that need to be answered right now.
Perfect. Yes, we do have a few more questions in the chat. Specifically about the type of projects, I see 2 questions. The first one, for writers, what is considered a completed work? A first draft or an entire novel, or an entire section of the book? Can you clarify on that?
Yeah. So you're going to tell us what you're working on, and the content is more important than the format. And we're gonna figure out what it is you're working on. So let's say it's a long form poem, or a short story, a series of short stories, and then we're gonna figure out how much of that we can curate onto the stage. So imagine yourself getting the grant performance that says, yay, we can't wait to present your work. You've got 20 minutes. And so what is it that you're going to present in 20 minutes? It does not have to be a whole novel, can't be. It can be a part of a chapter of a new novel. It can be 2 short stories. It can be 8 poems. It can be 8 poems with music behind you. You have to think about what it is that you're aiming for and probably overproduce a little bit. But really, it's your job to tell us what it is you want to produce with the grant that's logical to your career, and will have some sort of end point where we can select part of it for a stage presentation. I'll say here in answer to this question, to go above and beyond, that the city of LA does not own your work. It is yours to produce and to change. So let's a musician, and I want to do.
Oh, Joe, we lost you for a second. You are frozen. Let's give Joe a minute to come back. I'm sure it's an connectivity issue. All right. All right, everybody, let me text Joe very quickly. I'll be right with you. right, I see that Joe logged out and will log in again, so we'll resume when he is back. But I just want to answer one or two questions in the chat that I can answer. I see Ismail, those who live in LA County have less of a chance. No, that do not worry about that. You can live in LA County, and that doesn't mean you have less of a chance. It's just that you have to show that you have, this history of presenting work in the city of LA, and that has to be 3 or more years. So I hope that answered us the question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good, perfect.
All right, I'm gonna finish answering the question from whoever asked. We don't own your work. We own the premiere of the work. So if I'm a musician, I'm making 4 new compositions and 3 of them make it to the stage, you can present them as they are, and then you can go and reorganize them later for an album, right? So we're not purchasing your work. It belongs to you. It's your intellectual property. So you want to produce something that's great enough to present to the public, and it's finished in its mostly finished state, but then you can go on and rewrite it and redo it later if you have other presentations for it. All right, same for painters and everyone else. You can, you own the work, you can sell it, show it anywhere you want after we premiere it.
And another question about the type of project. Are short films okay?
Yeah. The Los Angeles Municipal Art Gallery has many small rooms where they can show a film or they can show a portion of a film. We only have 1 or 2 projectors, so you may have to budget the extra cost of helping us with a projector or a projector bulb for the length of the exhibition. We don't know how many filmmakers are going to apply and how many are going to be selected. So the people on the panel are different than the people who run the gallery. So totally fine. We'll find a way to present it, but you may need to help us if indeed, you're producing on 8mm and we don't have an 8mm projector.
Yeah, and we'll take 2 more questions before we move on to the next section. The first one is geography. Thibault wants to ask if you need to have lived in LA for 3 years.
What do the guidelines say?
Yeah, you either live in LA or you have a 3 or more year history of presenting work.
Yeah, so you either live in LA or you have 3 years of presenting. But this would not be a grant to apply for if you just moved from New York last year, because you're up against other people who have a longer relationship to the city of LA. So again, please apply. It's not a eligibility. It's not a competitive requirement, but it's an eligibility requirement. And we'll call you if we feel like you're not eligible. But then you can apply next year because presumably you've moved here and you're going to stay here.
Thank you. We have one question about supplemental materials, but I don't know if we'll go in more details when you go over the applications.
You're all way ahead of me. Let's move on.
All right. We can continue.
All right. We can report. So please make sure that you have the required numbers of years of exhibitions, publications, and performances on your resume. We will not move you to the next level if you include 13 instead of 15 or 7 instead of 8. If you have received a COLA fellowship already, you're done. This is a once-in-a-lifetime honor. Even the trailblazers, we try not to repeat. Individuals enrolled in a degree or certificate program. So if you came here mid-career to get the long-awaited Master of Fine Arts, it's complicated for us to fund you while you're a student because we don't fund student artists. And we know even though you have had a career before, if you're going through a certificate or degree program at the same time as you're getting your COLA grant, it may be complicated. So just FYI, if that's your case, call us or email us and we'll tell you if you're eligible. Artists who produce art as a hobby. This is a grant for very high level, avant-garde, intellectual artists. This is not a good opportunity for people who just produce art as a hobby. And lastly, any work that's created on ensemble or group shows, if that is the majority of what the panelist hears about and sees in your proposal, you will be sent back to us for near instead of COLA. And lastly, if indeed, as I just said before, you're a poet and you're going to read your poems, but you want to hire some musicians out of your grant money to perform behind you, you need to make sure that none of those musicians are full-time, part-time employees of the city of Los Angeles in any department, because it becomes a huge conflict of interest for us if we give somebody money and then they hire city employees. So Muna and I are not eligible as backup dancers for any dancers. All right, let's move to the next thing. Grant award, $10,000 per individual. You will not hear from us until next May or June. So if you are indeed applying for this grant, set it aside and expect to get a letter from us next July. One other note of caution for those of you who are applying. There is a set of artists who've gotten this grant. They are already in process with their new projects, and they will be premiering their work in June. So please, please, please do not be one of the artists that sends Muna and I an angry email in June saying, how dare you? You didn't even tell me what happened, and now here's these 10 artists that got the grant. Those are last year's artists. We are good people. We are on your team, and we will get you a letter telling you what happened for next year as soon as we have the budget, because the panelists rank the applicants, but we go to City Hall with a sword and a shield and we fight for a budget that's as big as possible. So Muna and I cannot send you a letter of acceptance or regret until we get a budget. And that usually happens in the middle of May. And then we have to then figure out how to strategize who we need to contract with first. And since you're not doing a 4th of July parade for us, we would not have you as the first people we contact as soon as the budget lands and is done. We would push you into July or August. Please remember to apply for something that's solo. Please remember that if you choose a small number of unaffiliated players to be behind you, if I'm a musician and I compose for trombone and I want to make a composition for 5 trombones, I'm going to be the trombone up front. 4 of my friends are going to be behind me. I have to pay them out of my grant money to perform, rehearse and perform. And it's going to be clear to the audience that I'm the composer and I'm the lead player. And that's it. Let's move to the next section. I think these are all things that are redundant, but it's worth saying again and again because we inevitably have mistakes. So peer panel process. Every year we go out and find new artists, new arts administrators, new educators, new people to be on our panel. They come for one time only in this category. They are experts. They are diverse in every possible way that we can fit into a team. And they are responsible to review and rank the proposals. This is how they rank you. So more so than thinking about who's on the panel, which you'll never guess, and we don't even know because we haven't picked anybody yet, you need to think about how they score you. And 80 points is for the stuff that you've already accomplished in your career. It's for a really excellent resume. It's for a really excellent statement about yourself. And it's about really excellent samples and letters of recommendation. So these are the things that get you the most number of points out of 100. It is not the proposal. It is not the idea of, doing something outlandish or amazing or whatever with the money. That can only be a tiebreaker at 20 points when you talk about your proposed project. If it is aspirational and interesting, then you get those 20 points. If it's just, I'm going to make it bigger, I'm going to do an installation, or you kind of dial it in, the panelists will see that and they will worry that you're not quite following the trajectory of your career. You're imagining, something that's not really necessary. So then do, again, focus on your existing accomplishments, your existing body of work. And we don't know who's going to apply. So that's the other part of this, which is just to sort of figure out how to describe yourself really, really, really well. Because here's, again, a thing that applicants don't always appreciate, which is, imagine that I'm a panelist and Muna delivers to my doorstep 170 proposals. They are in alphabetical order, but that's not how I'm going to read them. So my first job as a panelist is to separate people out. So I'm going to put the painters over here, and I'm going to put the sculptors over here, and put the photographers over here, and the filmmakers over here, and the ceramic artists over here, and I'm going to create piles. So the very first thing that you want to do for the panelists is describe what your primary practice is so they can put you in that pile, right? You can say abstract painter, you can say, photojournalists, you can say, feature-length filmmaker, whatever it is that's going to help them is great, because they may have to divide categories even further between representational art and abstract art or whatever they choose. But really, the important thing is, I'm saying here, is to sort of have that one distinct sentence that says who you are, and be ready to put that in your proposal, and be ready to land on a very specific project, because it's an aspect of business writing and business proposals, and grants are business proposals. You're telling us what we get to buy from you for $10,000. Let's move down, Amuna. It's grant writing basics to speak in exponential writing. This is not a creative writing assignment, so please be as factual as possible. Facts matter. Where you showed, highlighting the importance of shows, highlighting the themes of work, especially because you're not going to show us 15 years of work. So these are the things that the panelists appreciate, because these are facts from your career. Please separate out personal story from facts about your career. It's very important that they understand the productivity of what you've done and not just your life story. Our budget goes up and down. We're going to aim for, 10 to 12 fellows and 10 to 12 trailblazers, and you can wish us luck, because while you're making proposals, we're going to fight for a budget. Next is, okay, so now we're going to get into the parts of the proposal where we can answer certain questions. So there is a cover page where you tell us how to contact you. We're going to go over that in a minute. It's the simplest things: mailing address, email. The only thing that might be tick your interest on the cover page is that we're asking you for your website address. The panelists will not go to your website unless they're confused. They will not look at more of your samples on your website. You should not tell them to do that, because they are busy reading 170 proposals, and they are going to assume that what you sent us as your 10 samples or your 5 minutes of viewing is what we have to see to judge you. The website is there in case we have questions that we can't answer and we can't reach you. So just know that panelists are not surfing your website. Narrative, we'll go over it soon, but again, we're wide open to the kind of narrative you want to use to introduce yourself. Your resume, I've gone over it. Chronological is the most important thing for us. You can separate out group shows and one-person shows. You can separate out publications. You can do it however you want, as long as we can count. Artistic samples. So here's the choices. You can send us video clips up to 5 minutes, and this is the kind of thing that is generally sent to us. If you are a literary artist, you are a performing artist, you are a dancer or a musician, most of those people almost always choose video, because even if you're a literary artist, we want to see you presenting the poem. We want to see if you wear a costume. We want to hear the tone of your voice. We want to understand what it'd be like to put you on a stage. So in the comfort of your own home, please read your samples for your cell phone camera and submit us those video clips. Even sometimes in the design visual category, people with complicated installations will send us a video clip. But again, the bad news here is that you can't go back and forth. We don't want to get you to send us 10 images down below and 2 video clips. This is a kind of must choose category. So choose the category that is best for you. If you are a design visual artist and you make complicated installations, then you should choose, I think you should choose images, photos, JPEGs, good ones, high quality, and you should show us the full view of the installation and 2 close-ups. The full view of the installation from a different angle, and then close it and get to the next work. Same if you're a sculptor. You can show us the work from 2 different angles and then get on to it. You have the disadvantage there of, not being able to show us as many works as a printmaker who might be able to show us 10 prints from the last 2 to 3 years, but them's the breaks. We don't want you to do a curated walkthrough of the installation and tell us things about it. It's not a real-time experience for the curators because you won't be there walking through an installation and telling people what to think. So the panelists are experts in their field. They know how to judge you. They don't need you to overdo it with the samples. What they do need to understand is what they're seeing. So simple samples with the title and medium and dimensions is what they want. If you are submitting digital images, please don't add more to the bottom. This is not the place to tell us that it was inspired by Picasso, or, it's just not appropriate for you to add qualitative content to the bottom of the images. The panelists really like to see that as if they're walking through a gallery and all they have is the image and the label on the wall. They don't need more. Letters, again, critical reviews, if you have them, great, from the past 2 years. Again, I suggest you highlight the most important parts. You have 3 choices to add to the end of your proposal, and you do not need to choose 3 things. If you just have one, hot letter of recommendation, that's all you need. Don't sweat it about reviews. Don't include a second letter just because you want to fill up the space. Only give us 3 things at the end that are exclamation points on your proposal. Don't just add things to add them. It's the wrong way to make a business proposal. Let's move down and then I'll take questions, Muna. I think the next part is just leading us to the application itself. So I'll break for some questions and then we'll go through the application itself and answer people's questions about the instructions for each part.
Sure. Well, no further questions in the chat right now, although Melody was wondering if, as a writer, she can submit just a text, and I say that it's a choice of, she would have to choose what is the best, what she considers best.
So again, I will say to this applicant, imagine us at home reading, and how you're going to stand out to them. If you just submit a text, it may not stand out to them in the same way as making a video of you presenting the work. And knowing that if you're a writer, that you will be presented on the stage, it might be important for you to show them how you read your own work. So unless you're a poet and you make poems that are designed as graphic elements, what they call picture poems, I don't see a reason why you would choose written material over video. Just FYI, think about how you want to stand out to the panelists and think about meeting them in your sample material.
Exactly. Thanks, Joe. Thibaut is asking, for the proposal, should I include mention of the person I would ideally hire as my fabricator and show a budget?
No, we don't need a budget from you, and we don't want to know who you're going to hire to be your picture framer or any of that stuff. It's unnecessary. This is not a grant category where we do any budgeting with you other than to tell you that you should spend money on yourself. You shouldn't overspend on materials. You should hire your own essay writer because that's the way you get a good essay for the catalog. We will hire the portrait photographer so that all the portraits are the same. We will hire the graphic designer and the editor to make sure the book is good. But we will make those decisions together at contracting. There's no need to talk about any of that now.
Perfect. No other questions so far for now.
All right, so let's go to the application itself. I think should be on the bottom here.
There you go.
There you go. So this is the cover page. When you click on it, it's really obvious stuff. You can go all the way to the bottom. Muna, there's the place where you put in your website. Please know that that's not sample material. It's totally optional. And then there's this thing called RAMP ID. You're applying for a government grant, and this makes you
we're having that frozen issue again. Joe, I don't know if you can hear us. Sorry about that, everyone. And thanks for your patience. Joe is gonna come back. Joe, if you can hear us, I think the best thing to do is to log out and come back. Let me also message Joe. Perfect. I see that he's logged out. I'm going to answer Millicent's question while we wait for Joe. So Millicent, unfortunately, our format doesn't allow you to do both. So the question is, for the written versus video samples, is it better to submit a video or a written sample? As Joe said, that is really up to how you want to present your work, considering that you are going to be reading, you know, your writing project at the end. And you have to choose. It has to be either videos or a writing sample. Oh, and Joe is back. Wonderful. So we were talking about RAMP, the RAMP idea.
The RAMP. Don't worry about it. Let's move on.
All right.
You don't need a RAMP ID now. It's optional.
That's correct.
Just put in 5 zeros and move on. This is something that the city requires us to work with you on, that you are a registered local vendor. I know that people go to restaurants all the time and you go to the bathroom and there's this little thing on the wall. It looks like a dollar bill and has City Hall in the middle of it. That's a registered vendor in the city of Los Angeles. You will get one of those for the year of this grant and then you will cancel it. So we'll work with you on that later. It's not necessary now. Although we're required to ask you the damn question because we have rules that we have to obey. So the most important part about the next page is that you sign the expectations, right? That you understand that you're not applying to spend $10,000 on bronze without paying yourself, that you're not calling yourself a multidisciplinary artist and telling us that you're not sure what you're going to produce. It's just not appropriate for this category. You have to choose an artistic discipline. That's the most important thing on this page, and you choose one. You can choose visual design, if you're architecture, graphic design, product painting, printmaking, photography, anything like that, visual design. Literary, poet or fiction writer, choose the box. Performing artist, this is a solo musician. You compose the music and you play the music. Performing artist, choreographer, dancer. You choreograph the dance and you are the primary dancer in the piece. Next is performing artist, playwright, actor. You are a one-person theatrical person. You might buy costumes. You might have someone else put on your makeup, but you are the writer of the words and the choreographer of the movement, and you perform on stage in your own work. Application, city council district. This is where, again, I encourage you to go to neighborhoodinfo.lacity.gov, and Muna can put that in the chat. And there it is, where you can put in your address and it'll tell you if you're in council district 13 or 1 or 11. And if you're not, you're not. And you put in elsewhere in Los Angeles County, saying that you live in Pasadena or Santa Monica or whatever. All right, next part is your specialization. This is where we tell you to put word printmaker, photographer. We know you might be a photographer and fashion designer, but for the purpose of the grant, you're applying for photography, so you put in the word photography. This again helps the panel put you in a pile and review apples and apples together and oranges together, which is much preferred than going in alphabetical order, because they can really make good choices that way. If they read everything in alphabetical order, they end up reading everything 5 times because they have to say, oh, there was someone else who did fashion photography. Now I need to go back and find that person. And then briefly describe the style of your work. Again, 3 to 5 sentences, photojournalist, Africa for years. Now I make street photography in LA. That tells them exactly what they can expect to see when they open the work, that you're a descriptive street style photographer that uses natural light and natural settings, and that you're out in the streets. Just do us the favor of doing that, because it gives them a sense of, again, how they might put photographers in different piles, right? If they get so many photographers that they have to organize, that would be a way that they would organize. Then you sign the front page and you move on. The next section is the place where you do your narrative response. Again, this is the introductory text. It's expository. It should include as many facts as possible. You probably don't want to have promotional language here. So if indeed you work in theater, and you get lots of those 1-sentence, blurbs about your work, like, he transported us to another world, 5 stars. That is not the kind of thing that you want to put here, because it's not attributed to anyone, and it's not it's not a sentence, and it's probably not the best way to apply for this grant. So really think about, presenting yourself with an authentic text. Tell us about your education. Tell us about who inspired you. Tell us about your style and your practice. You've got 900 words. You do not have to fill up the page, but it really is good for the panelists to meet you in your own words. And your own words is most appropriate here, unless you're incredibly introverted and you want to use someone else's words. But again, be wary that the panelists may be suspicious if indeed they don't meet you here. In the second thing, you're going to estimate the project you'll pursue. You have 6 to 7 months to produce it. It really is between October and April that you produce the work. You really only have $6,000 to $7,000 of the $10,000 grant to spend on this. So do make sure what you're applying for is aspirational yet feasible. And then we always say start with a succinct sentence so the panelist knows right away. I propose to produce 1 set of thematic paintings, or 4 to 5 chapters of a new novel, or 1 20-minute excerpt from a new film or a new theater work. It's always good to tell them what they're buying first and then describe the details of that, the content, the characters, the purpose in your career. So we also put on the bottom here this note that says that COLA-IMAP projects cannot be reprised, recycled, recorded, or redesigned from prior works. This is not a grant for you to go back and fix something that's already been made. I'll say it again because it's very important. We are getting new work. New means never seen before. You will hold it back from any other premiere until we premiere it, and then you can move that work on to other opportunities. But we're buying the premiere, so you can't make 5 paintings, show them in New York, and then have them be their first LA premiere at the Lamag Gallery. We want work that's never been seen before. That is the purpose of people coming to the COLA exhibitions, is that they get to see fresh things that have never been shown before. Again, you own them afterwards. You can adapt them afterwards. You can make your suite of 4 paintings into 14 paintings. again, later is later, but we are buying the, so please do not propose right away, shoot yourself in the foot by proposing to say that you're going to go back and rethink a performance you did 5 years ago because you're, a feminist now and you weren't then, and now you're going to add a new spin to it. It's really not the purpose of this grant. All right, let's go to the next portion. Artistic documentation, again, we can't stress it enough. These are the choices. You have links. You tell us the link. It's very, very important that if you have a link with a password, that you give us the password. If the panelists, and if we can't open it to review it, you, again, created a problem for us. So please make sure that you are giving us links that are open to us to see, that they are, in fact, 10 images is the first choice. If you're visual design, go to the next page, Muna. I think the next one should be the video uploads. You have space to describe it here, but this is a description that we read out loud in the boardroom so that all the panelists can be reminded of what they saw at home. So this description should not be long and involved. Again, not an opportunity for you to add content. It's just something like, I'm giving you a video, a real-time video of a 20-minute performance at the Leimert Park Jazz Festival. Please start at minute 11.20 to see my solo in the jazz performance. So that's the importance of what you're putting there, not the genesis of, your relationship with Thelonious Monk and how you shared a hotel and he inspired this piece. That we don't, trust me, the musicians are going to know that right away when they hear the piece. So artistic documentation, make sure you give us the details, what we're supposed to watch. Real time. Please don't give us anything that's a teaser reel where you are showing headshots of yourselves in 15 different roles over the last 15 years, and you have Beyonce music in the background. The panelists will automatically be confused because it's not a theatrical sample of you. They don't get to see your one-woman show that way. And it's redundant because we don't need to see you in 15 years of roles. You've already established that on your resume. So please don't send us teaser reels. It makes us feel like you're in the wrong category, that you're not a theater artist at all, and that you're applying to be a video maker. Mark it as complete, send it to us. Again, we'll test the links, but if your password expires, when the panel happens, then it's, again, your responsibility to make sure that these links stay open for us, because I think this panel is going to happen. Well, we don't even know until we see how many proposals we have to read. So I'm not even going to say that. But suffice to say, the panel's not happening next week. So I would say it's safe for you to send us stuff that's available to us until next April, because that's when we get a budget. So it could be as late as April. Now I'll open for all questions, Muna, because I think we're done.
Yeah, that's correct. That was the last of the guidelines, including the supplemental items. And I just want to clarify, Ismail, that supplemental items don't have to be just videos, right, Joe? They can be also articles.
The supplemental materials are things in another person's voice that add value to your proposal. It can be a letter of recommendation. It can be a critical review. And what was the third category?
Could it be a news article, or?
Yeah, it could be a published item from a newspaper or magazine, or it could be a published item like from let's say you were in a jazz program at LACMA and they did a program. And in that program, the curator of jazz at LACMA talks about your particular work. So again, as long as it's written by somebody else about you, it's eligible to be put on the end of the proposal, and they are not videos. We don't want you to use up the artistic samples in any way to to take away from the samples. The supplementals are written. They are other people's voices. The samples are you, and they are artistic.
Mhm. Um, well, we have a couple more minutes for more questions, so please feel free to keep them coming. And folks can feel free also to unmute themselves if that's easier as well. And yeah. Question for Joe. Do you want me to keep the guidelines screen shared, or
No,
we can
you
just
can
go
take
to
away, take away the guidelines, and if anyone
Great.
has any questions. So the way to reach us is email. It's the best place to ask us a question, to formulate a question after today. So if you have a question for us, if you get
Mhm.
confused, please email us. I think, Muna, they can send it to DCA Grants,
Yeah,
correct?
I'll put it in the chat. Yes.
So dcagrants@lacity.org is the best place to reach us, and the staff will get to you as soon as possible. The deadline is approaching. Please don't wait until the last minute. Please create your login in the system. Please save your materials. Please print a copy for yourself in case SurveyMonkey goes down, or, again, we can't guarantee anything in the city. So you should always save a copy of what you've written by printing it out. Our goal is to have you enter material into a system that can save it from year to year, so you can always go back to it and customize it for next year and the year after that. But again, always good for you to have copies of everything on your desktop, copy of the resume you submitted, copy of the letter of recommendation you got from somebody. These things are all usable and customizable.
Super. Thanks, Joanne. I'm putting the email address as well in the chat for everybody to have for after the webinar.
So Nancy has a question, or Nancy saying thanks.
Yeah. Lauren has a question, and Lauren, I'd like to invite you to unmute yourself if you'd like, if you feel comfortable to just tell us a little bit more about it.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I was just asking, is it possible to be just a choreographer? My understanding from listening to you is I'd also have to dance in the piece.
This is a grant for someone who dances in their work.
Okay.
It's a solo grant. So if you've been a choreographer for groups and other people for many years, that qualifies you. But in this particular case, you're taking time off of choreographing for other people, and you're choreographing for yourself in a primary role. This is your opportunity to step aside from other people and do something solo.
So my title will be choreographer dancer?
That's correct. We hyphenated in the application because we want choreographers to know that this is not a choreographer grant. It is a choreographer, dancer, solo performer grant.
And that's very clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Sandy, I see you have a raised hand. Go ahead.
Yes, in one of the tutorials on the website, you requested a hard copy of the full grant in case something happened with the system. That's what it said. Would you still like us to hand deliver or mail you a hard copy with it?
It's helpful if you hand mail us a copy of it, just in case. Again, COVID happened and we were locked out of our offices. So that would be an opportunity where we really needed the paper. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. I think the best thing for you to do is for you to submit it on the computer, for you to save a hard copy for yourself. And while you're making a copy for yourself, you might as well print another one and mail it to us. It's a lovely backup for us. Thank you.
And in some of the text I read, you encourage publications that put something about publications in.
Publications can be part of your public work for the last 15 years. So if you had a year where you were not exhibiting, but you were in a book, or you were in a book project, that's part of your artistic resume. And then indeed, if someone wrote something about you in a catalog, then that you could Xerox that and have that as a supplemental material.
Okay, and you produced monographs of bodies of work.
Of your own?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. If you have a monograph, just make sure everything's contemporary to the last 2 or 3 years.
Got
So
it.
we don't need to, in your resume, you can list as many publications as you've been in as you'd like. But if you do give us samples in the supplemental box, please make sure that it's something from a publication from the last 2 to 3 years, written by someone else that adds value to your proposal.
Okay, cool.
Anyone else? Any other questions?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Thibaut.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Feel like I'm asking so many questions just because it's like the first time. But when you were talking about the budget and how there's like the first benchmark, for a project, and this is like assuming the project's accepted, would it be something where you'd recommend that people look for outside funding if it's like the initial startup of the project would need some amount of funding? Because it sounds like you don't get the money right away.
So it's very complicated for us to fund things that require you to fundraise. So right away, you have to think about whether that's too much of a risk for the panelists to even hear about.
Yeah.
So I'll give you 2 examples that are fine. So one, you could say something like, I finished shooting a documentary film and I need to use this opportunity as finishing funds because I need to go into the editing room and I need to edit the film and produce the final cut.
Yeah.
That's clear to us that things have been funded by other people and that, your travels to wherever to get the documentary footage is done, and that's a plus. Bad thing is if you tell us, I'm going to make, a series of gold bars on the floor in a minimalist sculpture, and I need to raise $1 million to buy gold.
Yeah.
Then immediately the panel is like, well, this might not happen.
Yeah.
So think about something simpler
Yeah.
for your proposal that doesn't make the panelists wonder if you're going to pull it off.
Yeah.
So
I think
find,
for me, it's
yeah.
like very doable, but like just knowing my cash flow in the art market these days, like having that extra income to do like a larger installation that I'm proposing, like I'd need someone to build the armature that I think I would have to do as I'm starting the work for it. So I don't know, but I'll just
Well, here-
use my common sense around it.
Well, again, you'll use your common sense and also you'll go back to the benchmarks. So let's say you hear from us next July that you got the grant and you get a contract from us in August, and it takes the city 90 days to execute the contract. Once it's signed by City Hall, then they can't take the money away from you, earthquake, flood, or fire, and that's when you out and pay someone to make the armature. So I would say to you, really don't plan on spending any money until October of 2025,
Yeah,
because that's when you're absolutely sure that your first check is coming
I
for
see.
$4,000. And you
Okay.
can certainly, pay for something at that point. But again, you're doing business with the city of LA. Every step is long and complicated. You're not the only one going through it. And I think, again, one of the reasons why we stress simplicity here is because we don't want to hear later that we're responsible for you not finishing your installation because the payments came too slow.
Yeah.
All government grants are reimbursement grants. We never promise money up front. It's just not possible for us, given the city's charter. So just think about maybe not doing that installation and doing something simpler, or doing objects that can be in that installation later, right? You can show objects now and a conceptual drawing for the installation as well, letting people know where your career is going. But you may not be able to do this full installation if it really requires you to have a lot of cash flow. As I'm just being honest with you, we're not a big cash flow people. Muna and I can submit an invoice to City Hall and we don't know how long the line is to get paid. And sometimes the check goes out in 15 days, and sometimes it goes out in 90 days.
Yeah, okay. Got it. And like in terms of allocating money to yourself as the artist, I mean, $4,000 doesn't go very far in LA, so like that's like a month's worth of work, basically.
Yeah, I
if
mean,
you do
again, the purpose of the grant is not for you to do something very complicated and
that.
expensive.
Yeah, okay.
It's for you to do something that's doable so you can pay yourself. So if indeed you're already know that you want to pay yourself $6,000, then the question is, what can I make for $3,000, right?
Yeah.
So think about that, because again, we're not requiring you to make grandiose, complex things. We're requiring you to show us the next step in your career.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. And just in terms of back to the
Sorry, Thibaut, I just want to give the floor to any other
Well, I
person.
just wanted to clarify the question that you answered about the timeline for people living in LA, because it is a matter of like eligibility. So it sounds like there is some advising around, oh, this person hasn't been in town very long, like maybe don't consider them, or because it seems like that's a part of the conversation based on what you said.
All right, so the words are really specific. So do you live in the city of LA?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So then we will automatically consider you an applicant because you live in the city of LA. So then
Okay.
it's up to the panel to decide if your 15 years of expertise also shows that you've participated in LA. Because we're a government funder and the tax dollars come from LA and get respent in LA. So it's not a matter of Muna and I deciding there's a line in the sand, but we don't know who else is going to apply. So if someone who's lived in LA for 40 years and has built their career here and is shown in LA applies, the panel may very well choose that person because it's an LA grant. And this is again why you should just keep applying, because the longer you're here and the more you're rooted here, the more the panel sees you as a treasure in LA. But we've had many instances where great artists apply, they just moved to LA, they're doing a 1-year stint at a college, and they don't get the grant because the panelists don't see them as part of the LA milieu. So again, read the guidelines specifically. Once you live in the city of LA, you're automatically eligible. Once you have 3 years of presenting in the city of LA, you're eligible. Everything after that is competitive, and we don't decide that. There's no science to that.
You're welcome to. All right, we'll take one more question as we're wrapping up. Again, feel free to unmute yourself or raise a hand.
Or go to brunch.
Yes, it is Saturday morning after all. Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Joe, I think this might be it for now.
Yep, let's call it a wrap.
Super. Well,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you, Joe, for leading us through these guidelines and the webinar.